All right, welcome in everyone. UGA football live with JC Shelton. We're here after Georgia's win over Mississippi State in Sanford Stadium. 34-point favorites. 34-point favorites. Georgia was coming into this game against the 1-4 Bulldogs from Starkville. Blown out by Toledo. Beaten handily by Texas. They come into Athens and put up 31 points on Georgia's defense. What a weird game, right? And has there been a normal game for Georgia this year? No, absolutely right. There was not a full game of execution. And if you listen to Arthur Lynch and myself coming into this game, taking on the mantra of a Georgia fan, we're like, what do we want to see? A full game of execution, because that's what you're going to need down the road, right? And we'll get into those games here in a bit. But Georgia wasn't that today. Offensive miscues everywhere early, right? The defense played so well early. Mississippi State couldn't do a dang thing. And you have a true freshman at quarterback, make his second start, right? You didn't have playmakers at receiver. You had a run game that was really relied upon heavily. So, Georgia was thinking, okay, one-dimensional Mississippi State here. They allowed 306 yards passing total in this game. But you wouldn't have known that from the first half because of how Mississippi State played and how Georgia's defense played. You had a really bad decision by Carson Beck turned into an interception off the ricochet. Basically gifted Mississippi State 3 points there, right? Other than that, Mississippi State wasn't doing anything on offense. Georgia's defense was routinely getting off the field. They didn't get a first down until the second half? As far as a third down conversion goes. And they end up at the end of the game, 21 red zone points. It was just incredible to see the offense kind of get in a rhythm there in the second quarter. And then the defense start getting gashed. You had a drive basically resulted off a 75-yard pass that Georgia gets blown off the top with, right? You had defenders like Malachi Starks included here, folks, not just Dalen Everett and Julian Humphrey and Daniel Harris, which seem to be like getting the blunt of the blowback anytime a pass is completed. But it wasn't just those guys. They're biting early when they don't need to. When your defensive front is playing really well, you're biting early. You get beat over the top, right? Just not reading their keys, not being where they need to be, and allows to gash plays. Georgia was the second easiest team to complete a pass against coming into this game. Believe it or not, when I read that stat, I couldn't believe it either. And you allow those plays to a team like this, that's what's scary. That's what's frightening Georgia fans, okay? Because I feel like a large majority of the fan base, offensive struggles here and there, not a huge deal because you've seen Georgia's teams not be awesome on offense, but play championship caliber football on defense, have really good special teams game, control the time of possession, control the field, and be fine and win games and go to the postseason and win national championships. Right? That 2021 offense wasn't anything crazy, right? You had Stetson Bennett come off late, right, and make the plays you needed in the postseason. But during that season, it wasn't like Georgia's offense was amazing, was crazy, right? Was extremely efficient. But the defense was the 21 defense. So that's if you're a Georgia fan, listening here, and thank you for joining us here on Instant Reactions on X, Facebook, YouTube, the Pulse Sports Network. If you're a Georgia fan listening to this, I feel like that should be your biggest concern. It is mine for this team. And please jump in the comments and add anything. Let's process this together because it's definitely not the showing you wanted out of your Bulldogs. Let me know what you think, and we'll read them off to get featured on the show. But yeah, I think, getting beat in the pass game like this against a true freshman who, obviously played really well, by the way. He definitely has what it takes to play in this league. Didn't have great protection. I feel like Georgia got pressure on him, especially early, of course. It goes 20 for 37, 306, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Man, Coleman, 8 catches, 103 yards. That that's absolutely not what Georgia wants from its secondary, which I thought was a strength of this team coming into this year based on the safety play. Really good safeties in Dan Jackson, Malachi Starks, right? Dalen Everett expected to grow this year. Corners, you never really talk about them until they get beat. So something to consider. But it wasn't a good day for those guys. And I feel like almost the energy, excuse me, the energy in the second half at times, even you can point the last drive of Mississippi State in the first half. The energy there on defense, maybe the urgency, right? They're like, "Oh, we're going to get off the field here, go to the locker room with a big lead. Come out in the second half, put our foot on the gas." Georgia's defense wasn't like that. I don't know if they were gassed or what. I mean, Georgia controlled the time of the possession. They shouldn't have been. Georgia had a big lean on the time of possession in the first half. They end up only 7 minutes time of possession control, and most of that came on the last Georgia drive, which was like 8 minutes. And the offensive line played well for Georgia. Carson Beck, careless with the football in the red zone, the interception. So it was just, it's hard to really, sum up the game because of how inconsistent Georgia's execution was throughout. And that's how I look at it. I mean, you have Beck have a career game. If you would have been like, all right, JC, Beck's going to throw for 459 yards with 3 touchdowns, 36 of 48, had the 2 picks. I'm like, well, judging by Georgia's defense, if Carson Beck's throwing that well, I'm guessing we're running it well as well, right? But it was so surprising to me because you have a Beck line like that, but at times you're completely stalling and abandoning the run game, right? I mean, Mississippi State entered this game allowing the most yards per rush in the SEC. 5.1, something like that, 5.2. And at one point in the third quarter, well, no, the entire third quarter, you rushed the ball 6 times with a lead, and your offensive line was playing well, right? And that just was, I just don't know on that. A part of me wants to think, okay, you're probably going to have to pass to win against Texas, who played really well against Oklahoma today. Just absolute bully ball. And I know Oklahoma's offensive struggles. I absolutely know. Hawkins probably should have been benched in that game. Jackson Arnold should have came in as a better passer to get him back in that game. But they played really, really well. So you're probably going to have to pass against that team, right? Keep up with them. Georgia's going to allow some points. Georgia defense plays like this against Texas. They're going to allow a lot of points, folks. A lot of points. Texas has players. They have better offensive line, Mississippi State. They have better running backs. They have better pass catchers. And Ewers is electric with the ball in his hands as a passer. You're absolutely going to allow a boat race to happen if you can't clean things up defensively. But offensively, not attacking the run game like I thought they would absolutely have advantages really puzzled me. And just the attempts, right? Let's look at them. Trevor Etienne, 11 rushes, 35 yards. Nate Frazier, 10 rushes, 43 yards. I do like Nate Frazier getting as many carries as he did. But how do you get these guys going without giving them opportunities on a drive-by-drive basis? It was just all in Beck's hands. And we're seeing mistakes stack up for him. He had 3 picks against Bama, 2 today. That's 5 picks after throwing 0 through 3 games. 0. It's astonishing. That's astonishing. And you could think, okay, and that's what I was alluding to earlier, is you have to pass to win against Texas. Okay, you lose Colby Young. We need pass catchers to step up. Let's put it in Beck's hands and try to get some continuity in this pass game and reliability, execution-wise, for these younger receivers who are going to have to step up. The offensive line without Jared Wilson, right? Pray some cohesion there. Didn't play today. Drew Bobo, I think he did a fine job, but you're missing Tate Ratledge as well. Maybe it's a part of we need to get this pass game strong. Maybe, right? But I just feel like the run game, man, that's such a big part of this team, and it has been for Georgia and even Mike Bobo especially, and the balance isn't there. I don't know if that's intentional or not. It sure does seem like it. Absolutely, it seems like it. Blocking-wise, dude, I think The tight end position with Urasek, and he whiffed on a couple of today as well. I just don't know how you can rely on him as an edge blocker right now, and I think Georgia is going to see that on tape, especially. And Delp and Lucky, I know in Delp they're going to have to use him as more of a blocker right now because of that reason. You know, he finally got a couple of catches today. How many did he have? 2 catches, 28 yards. And that's what 5 catches on the season for Oscar Delp, which entering the season he's like, oh, that's one of the best tight ends in the SEC, maybe the country. Lawson Lucky, he's a better receiver right now than Oscar Delp. I wanted a big game out of him, right? 3 catches, 9 yards, caught the touchdown. He's good with the ball in his hands. But having Urasek in there at times to give either Lucky or Delp a break, or depending on what run sets you want and where you want the blocker, it's kind of a liability right now, having Urasek out there blocking on the edge. Shout out Arian Smith. Here's the thing, Arian Smith and drops, right? Early drops. He made up for it, though, and he's done that the last couple of weeks. 5 catches, 134 career day for him, touchdown, 26.8 average, right? A couple deep balls that were really nice from Carson Beck. And, you know, it's easy to be negative a game like this because you had such a lead, and you were so much better, and you allow what you did there to Mississippi State. But I think Beck, you know, he made a lot of good throws. You don't have 459 without a lot of good throws. It's just the mistakes, the untimely mistakes, the mistakes that he didn't make last year, which is odd. Is it to do with no Lad McConkey and Rob Bowers? That's questions always going to be there, isn't it? Absolutely, I think. But yeah, that's where the biggest question lies: is can you do it execution wise for a full game? That's not what happened. It's not what happened. Let's go through the drives here. Let's go through the drives. Yeah, so I mean, listen to this: Mississippi State first half, punt, field goal, right? And we talked about that field goal. Ricochet, Beck gets picked off. Mississippi State's perfect field position. They do nothing with the field position. 3 and out, field goal, punt, touchdown, punt, interception, right? And then second half, let's talk about the second half. And, touchdown, punt, touchdown. That, you know, and your starters were still in there. And I know they were still giving other guys opportunities. Plenty of guys got plays today, but that's just crazy because you know they have to pass to get back in the game. And that's a true freshman beating your defense over the top. And we rarely see Kirby Smart defenses barely beat over the top, folks. And that's why it's so surprising to me. You know, Malachi Starks led the team in tackles, 7. Dan Jackson, who's all over the field, 5 tackles. 3 tackles for loss today, 0 QB hurries, which is incredible to me. I mean, you have a Mississippi State offensive line that's looked abysmal all season. Just 2 pass breakups. Micah Williams had 1, didn't record any other stats. Tyrone Ingram Dawkins is probably playing like the best defensive lineman Georgia has right now. 2 tackles, tackle for loss for him. And, you know, that's like a prime opportunity too on an offense like this to force turnovers. I know they had the pick, and KJ Bolden gets his first pick, and that's one of the silver linings out of this, right? KJ Bolden made some good tackles. First interception in a Georgia uniform. I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of those. He's an absolute stud. There's a reason that Georgia's played him more than any other true freshman on the team. But forcing turnovers, I feel like that's where Georgia's lacking here as well on defense, beyond just getting beat over the top. Like, this is a team you should absolutely force turnovers to. A guy who's prone to make a mistake and a first-year starter, true freshman, that's fine. He'll grow into it. If you're a Mississippi State fan, that's fine. But Georgia, I mean, you absolutely have to take advantage of that, show him looks that he's not used to seeing. And Georgia played soft, pass defense-wise in the second, and they still got beat over the top. You look at Georgia team stats by quarter here. Third quarter, this actually, and I think there was more than this, but this is what I'm getting off of the stat broadcast, is 4 rushes for 58 yards. Second quarter, 4 rushes. First quarter, 8 rushes. Fourth quarter, 13, right? And that was that long drive, that really, really long drive. It was like 14 plays, 8 minutes a clock, right? That was a perfect drive. What I thought Georgia would do most of this game is drives like that. I mean, run the stinking ball, use that offensive line that's recruited really well. I don't care if you're missing 2 starters. Georgia recruits that position at the best in the country. They're loaded, right? They plan for this, to lose guys there and to sub in 4 and 5 star talent, right? So that was a much better fourth quarter in that standpoint. But you're passing it 31 times. No, 34 times in the first half. I guess take what the defense gives you. I don't know what Carson Beck, Mike Bobo, and those guys were saying, but I just feel like the run game should have been so important. That was a key for me heading into the game. You know, what I wanted to see out of these guys. Yeah, absolutely. I think gotta have it, guys. And I know London Humphreys had a drop today. It's his first drop of the season. He's caught every other target other than that this year. Him, Anthony Evans looked electric today. Right, those are guys that you have to get involved more, and that, like I said, again, that could have been one of Georgia's plans to get these guys involved more today, and in preparation for next week. Missing Colby Young, obviously, and definitely suspended there. But yeah, I know Kirby Smart was giving those guys earfuls, especially in the defensive secondary. Guys missing blocks up front here and there. Right, so he's giving these guys an earful. How are you going to respond? You know, you think about maybe from last week, you know, did Georgia look better than they did against Auburn? No. I mean, down the field passing, you know, Beck was good down the field, which I think is another silver lining you can take out of this. Still a 10-point win in Athens in an SEC game. Absolutely. I don't mean to get too down the dumps here. I just know I saw the UGA Twitter is just popping off right now, not in a good way. So I know a large portion of the fan base is not happy with the day. But again, like, you know, you get a win here, 10 points in Sanford Stadium, head into a game against Texas, and Texas has all the confidence in the world. They missed their starting quarterback for 2 weeks. Doesn't matter. He comes in, plays really well against Oklahoma, beats the brakes off the Sooners, who have a really good defense, actually. And now you face that team with ultimate confidence in Austin. College game day is going to be there. Late kick. Right, so that even adds to it. You know, Arthur Lynch talks about it all the time when he was playing as well. It's like the late kicks, you're twiddling your thumbs around for most of the day. You finally get there, you get kicked. You know, I think this is a very prime opportunity for Georgia and Mississippi State against Mississippi State to build confidence, build continuity in areas that haven't been up to snuff of what you want for championship football. Build confidence for younger players, for Carson Beck, for even the offensive play callers and what they think they can do and not do well. But also get your starters off the field, right? Save some miles on those legs, some snaps on those legs for next week. And Georgia was forced to play those guys a lot longer than I think they wanted to. So now you have to rebound, recover, and get ready for this huge, huge game next week. And I think even additionally, we'll talk about this because the parity in college football right now, and especially in the SEC, right? These, you know, you look at what Florida's doing to Tennessee right now. Let me check in on that. You look at what Florida's doing against Tennessee. Where's it at? 3-0 in the third quarter, right? Start of the third. You know what Vanderbilt did last week against Bama. You know what Bama did today. That Bama game, South Carolina had so many opportunities to put that game away. They didn't. You know, it's in Tuscaloosa. Bama's off. You know, traditional Alabama after a game like that at Vanderbilt, they're absolutely blowing the brakes off of Carolina. Didn't happen, right? These teams are absolutely close, just close. I don't know what it is. Is it the transfer portal situation? Is it, you know, NIL money and keeping these teams pretty even keeled throughout the season? Because these teams are absolutely, we witness teams like this blow out your Vanderbilts, your Kentuckys, your South Carolinas on a yearly basis, and it's not happening this year. Ole Miss 10-7 over LSU. So Texas has absolutely looked like the most dominant team in the SEC, and we were like, okay, They haven't played anybody yet. They play Michigan. We know what Michigan looks like, right? And then they play a decent Oklahoma team, top 25 team, 18th in the country, played Tennessee close, and they do what they did. And it's like that is the team to beat. That is the most dominant team. If Georgia goes into Austin and beats that team, I think at this point I'd be surprised. Georgia would have to put an entire game together. I think it is there. We've seen these players, a lot of these players do that before. But I think it's going to be very, very important for these guys, especially Georgia and Kirby Smart, Glenn Schumann, Travaris Robinson, to get the secondary shored up against Ewers in that passing offense. That's going to be the huge, huge battle, right? You don't want to get beat over the top, make Texas beat you between the tackles, make them run the ball, make them work for every yard. And we'll go with some positivity here too. Nina Brantley on Facebook, proud of them dogs. I like it. T Cracker, heck of a name. Go Dogs. We like it. All right, so there are some positive here. I think Nate Frazier, absolutely get him back, get him as many snaps as possible. Branson Robinson that went down with an injury, his knee, which is I'm absolutely gutted for him because he tore his patellar tendon last year, comes back from that, is still working on getting back to his former self, which we witnessed absolutely go off as a freshman in the 2022 season, the national championship season. He goes down with a knee. He was out for the rest of the game. Not sure on him. Maybe Kirby Smart has said something in the post game, which I've missed doing this. But, that adds to a running back room that, is already missing Roderick Robinson. So Nate Frazier's going to have to step up. And Cash Jones are going to have to step up and play more, right? Which I don't think is a bad thing for Nate because Nate's really, really good with the ball in his hands. I mean, the burst is just different. Burst is just different. So his issue is pass protection, which Kirby Smart's talked about a lot as a young guy coming in and joining the team in the summer. It's a big difference from what you do in high school, but he's going to have to be kind of forced in the fire here next week against Texas if Branson can't get back. So knock on wood for him. I hope for the best for him. I feel like he's a great kid. That is just, injuries, guys, part of the game, right? So hoping that he's okay. Arian Smith went down for a second after that 55-yard huge catch that really set up Georgia there for a score. Carson Beck, good throw by him, but he hit the turf hard when he went out. But he came back in and obviously had that huge catch, that touchdown catch to start the second half. Big plays wise, right? If Georgia can have these big plays consistently, right? But then clean up the mistakes here, the interceptions. Georgia had 12 plays of 15 or yards or more passing. They had 3 plays of 10 more yards rushing. Not very balanced. I know Georgia put the ball in the air a lot, but you want to be balanced, especially playing Texas next week. Third downs. Let's get third downs because Georgia was really good on third down today, 45%. That's good. They've struggled this year in that metric. 33% before last week. They had a good game against Auburn on third down. They were better in that metric today. Average yards to go 6.5. It was like 8 during that bad stretch. So that's improvement. That's good stuff to see. You want to see third down improvement. 5 of 11 today. Third and longs, 9+. They were 0-3. Right, so that's not where you want to be. Absolutely, you got to keep that. If Georgia is able to keep that around 6 yards, that's best case scenario because I think they do have bigger bodies and Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky to get those shorter passes and for first downs if you need them. So these are all things Georgia's going to be working on. But the question is, it's like you've got to be on your A game against Texas. And we'll talk about this game obviously in detail next week. Absolutely. But that's the big question for me. Can Georgia put together a full game? And they haven't yet this season. The season is still young. Absolutely. 6 games in, right? You're at the midway point. Kirby Smart has done a good job in years past of leading his team to be better on a game-by-game basis in certain areas. At least they have been this year. But the full game situation hasn't happened, right? Big test next week, but that's only the start of it, right? Because then you got Ole Miss. You got Tennessee. You got a Tech team that played good today against North Carolina. Won that game at the end. Very interesting. And the reason I brought up the parity in the SEC is because it feels like this year, even more now than ever, on a week-to-week basis, you can lose any game in this conference. And I feel like that's college football as a whole right now. And we have yet to put a finger on it, on why that is, but maybe the conference expansion and such plays a part into it, NIL, transfer portal, what have you. That probably does. Something has to be changed because we're not used to games like this. We're used to the blowouts here. Your number ones, your top 5 teams blown out. And the teams like we talked about earlier, like your Mississippi State, your Vanderbilts, your South Carolinas, and the teams that typically have been towards the bottom of the SEC. It's not really happened that much this year. And Georgia's also dealing with the same thing. So I know about how this team is made up, and I know there's a lot of good leadership on this team. And I know Kirby Smart. If you missed our interview with John Ledbetter, former Georgia defensive end, yesterday, it's definitely worth your time. Well, first, he told some great stories about Mark Richt, Kirby Smart, Nick Saban. He's a former Alabama commit. He told a really cool story about Kirby Smart. I would definitely check it out if you have time. It's worth a listen just for that alone. But also, he talked to this Georgia team this year twice already. And Kirby Smart's bringing him back because the guys love to hear from him. I can see why, but also he's been through some things that he can help this team from a leadership standpoint, from a non-complacency standpoint. You don't want to get complacent. And that's the battle. And Kirby Smart, you hear him talk about it. You heard Nick Saban talk about it a lot when he was at Alabama and even now on game day. And that's the challenge for this team. And I think John Ledbetter said a lot of good stuff about he believes that the leaders in this room that he's met with, that he spoke with, and then also Kirby Smart, as a guy who played under him and knows how he's made up, does believe that this team, they have all the talent. It's that leadership thing. It's the mentality they come into the games with that needs to improve. And he thinks it'll happen. And if you're a Georgia fan, I think there's good evidence to show you why that would happen later in the season. Just thinking about the captains you have in Carson Beck and Malachi Starks and the guys on the line of scrimmage, like your Dylan Fairchild, defensive line like your Michael Williams and Warren Brinson, and Smile Mondon missed this game, right? How big of a part would he have been in this game, right? You want him to get him back next week. They held Smile Mondon out. Jordan Hall missed. Jared Wilson, obviously. So you get those guys back. How good does that take the defensive line room? Right? How good does that help the linebacker core with a guy like Smile Mon Jr. and a captain, a guy who knows the defense probably better than any linebacker on that team? How does that help next week? So I think that could be potentially a big get back for Georgia if they're able to have those guys back, and we'll see, and they'll need them. But Georgia, listen, in really good games, I know that first half against Alabama wasn't up to snuff whatsoever, right? But the second half, Georgia proved to itself that it can play really, really good football against a good team for a whole half. Do it in 2 halves, and this Georgia-Texas game is going to come down to the wire. And I think Carson Beck, if he's able to keep throwing, like he proved a lot today, at least down the field. And he had a career day, 459, right? Career high in attempts, right? And the more I talk about it, the more I'm kind of convincing myself, to be honest, that Georgia did that for a reason as far as putting the ball in the air, because of the receiving core and how, these guys got to step up and the youth there and such. So it could pay off dividends next week. All right. Georgia, Texas is yet to be really, really tested by as complete of a team like Georgia that can do really good things on both sides of the ball. Right. Oklahoma, we know their offense, right? Their defense provides some issues, but they're not very balanced. Georgia can be that team. And we've seen that team at times this year. Right. But if you're a Georgia fan, you want to see a complete game. All right. And next week is the opportunity. Right. And I think Georgia, and the hype around this game, it's going to be that of Alabama. College game day is going to be there. It's going to be a whole situation. It's going to be a huge week. You're going to hear every talking head talk about this game. They're probably all going to pick Texas because it's the easy pick. It's the easy pick. You've seen them dominate. And I don't blame them. But if you follow this team enough, and this Georgia team, and know the talent that they have and what they can do, not necessarily what they have been doing, what the potential is, I think you should feel good about this as your Georgia fan, for this to be a great game, a close game, and Georgia have an opportunity to win it at the end, right? And it's big in the SEC race, right? And especially depending on how these couple of games go tonight. Like I already said, Florida is up on Tennessee. Let's check in again. Florida's still up on Tennessee in the third quarter. Ole Miss is up on LSU. LSU is an undefeated team in the SEC. A&M is the other lone undefeated team in the SEC. SEC race is going to be crazy at the end. Absolutely crazy. And also, out of the SEC, Ohio State, Oregon tied at 21. So we'll have to get on that game here in a bit till we jump off. But I really appreciate you all joining us for this instant reactions after Mississippi State and Georgia. Listen, I know we talk about the bad things. Wait, let's take a comment here by Austin Steiner. Sorry if I'm not spelling or if I'm not saying that right, Austin. But the D has been incredibly undisciplined this season. I know they're young, but it's been bad. There is a lot of youth, right? There is a lot of youth. And the thing about it, too, in the secondary, because you look at it, you're like, well, they have Malachi Starks. He's a junior, about to be a 3-time All-American. You have Dan Jackson, fifth-year senior. He's been there since 1998. How does this group play undisciplined sometimes? Well, it's more than two guys, absolutely, right? And the cornerbacks, Dalen Everett's had one season as a starter under his belt. Julian Humphrey, Daniel Harris, this is their first time getting snaps like this. Still young guys, right? And I think as long as I know Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp, and Travaris Robinson, those guys are pointing out things that they can do better. And they're the best defensive backs coach in the league. So I think that is going to get better, Austin. I think that is. Now, whether that will be at the time that Georgia needs it to be is the big question. And that's something that remains to be seen. Can it be next week? Ellis Robinson. Austin still talking to me. I appreciate you, Austin. Ellis Robinson needs to be starting. I tweeted something along those lines out. I'm like, give him more chances. Right? Because guys are getting big over the top. It's not like the play is going to dramatically drop off if you put Ellis Robinson in, the highest rated cornerback recruit in Georgia history. He's electric. We saw him play really well in the spring game. He gets some opportunities here and there this year, but not a lot. Typically, if Georgia does not play a guy like that, it's because he's not ready. But maybe, considering the issues today, allowing those deep balls, he does get more opportunities. And I don't think that hurts Georgia at all. But can they count on him to be in the right spot, I guess is the biggest question, which we wouldn't know sitting here, obviously, right? That's up to Kirby and that coaching staff and up to what Robinson does in practice. Absolutely. But I wouldn't hate that at all. And somewhere along the lines, offensively, give Lawson Lucky more chances. I think he can be that. And I hate comparing people to Rob Bowers because he's a generational talent. But I think Lawson has kind of the similar traits as far as after the catch, explosiveness in a big frame. And he could be that guy. Without Colby Young, you need a big body. You need somebody to go up and catch jump balls like that and to get in the end zone. He's been really, really good the last 2 weeks. I think the better tight end on Georgia's roster right now. And I think Oscar Delp has had to move into that blocking role that Georgia loves to use as a tight end because Urasek has had issues catching up. I don't know what that is. He played really well at Stanford, less as a blocker, more as a pass catcher. But here we are. Georgia needs him in that facet, and he hasn't showed up. So I think you expect to see Lawson Lucky used in the pass game more, as well as London Humphreys and Anthony Evans. Get him more chances. Absolutely. So these are all things Georgia. Hey, listen, young season, right? But we have a big game next week in Austin against Texas, and we'll talk about it 2 times next week. We'll have 2 shows. Arthur Lynch, former Georgia tight end, will join me. We also have a special guest as well in our later in the week show ahead of Georgia and Texas, and we'll be back for our instant reactions right after that game as well. So stay tuned there. Check me out on Athlon Sports, covering college football and Georgia football for those guys. It's been a fun season doing that. Really enjoy kind of the whole national scene as well. I think it's made me better and a little bit more informative for you guys as far as the entire college football landscape. But what are we going to do is jump off and watch Ohio State and Oregon, right? 2 teams that Georgia could potentially face in the postseason. Don't expect the Dogs to drop much in the AP poll, if anything. Right? You talk about the level of offense they did play. I know the defense wasn't up to what Georgia's expectations were, maybe the national expectations were. But if you really watch that game, Mississippi State gave what Georgia gave, right? And they were playing a little soft. Mississippi State took advantage. 605 yards of offense today by Georgia, 146 on the ground. Obviously, a crazy day by Carson Beck. Don't expect them to drop much. But those rankings don't really matter. College football playoff does, right? And those will come later in the season. And that's when we'll finally really learn what the committee thinks of the Bulldogs. Shout out to Austin. Go Dogs. Absolutely, sir. I appreciate you watching it and tuning in with us. But until next time, we'll be back earlier in the week. We'll talk Georgia, Texas. We're going to break this down as best as we can to get the best feeling we can going into the game, what we could expect what we want to expect from Georgia there. Obviously, a win would be a great start for the Bulldogs. So until next time, we appreciate you. As always, let me know what you think. Throw us some comments in there, and I'll get to them next week's show. Appreciate it.